Back in June, I had a rather interesting conversation with a friend. It began by her asking me what I was reading. It was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This book follows the lives of four men as they struggle to overcome issues of their past and present, which include, but are not limited to, depression, neglect, as well as emotional and physical abuse. I personally loved the book, but I happened upon quite a few people who weren't as keen. The aforementioned friend, for example, had not even been able to finish it. She seemed almost baffled by my openness to read and finish it, as well as my lack of disturbance by it as a whole. After asking me several times, it occurred to me that whilst both of us were disturbed by some of the events, it was in different ways. She was terrified that the author could have such thoughts, let alone express them, whereas I sympathized with the character. I could not fathom how a person could be so unaccepting of the fact that there is nothing wrong with entertaining the darker side of human thought if it remains just that. This got me thinking, why were people around me so averse to acknowledging the crueler side of humanity? Was this aversion something I could see in other aspects of my life? And what could I call it? All I could come up with was closed-mindedness. Closed-mindedness is defined as being unwilling to engage with new ideas. I felt that it was at least important to consider such ideas as part of the story, as they are often close to real life. Not doing this may result in closed-mindedness or the unwillingness to engage with the ideas. Then I realized that the issue lies in being open-minded. Open-minded, the way we see open-mindedness in society is really what changes how we can become a better society. Open-mindedness is defined as being willing to consider ideas that are new or different to your own. I realized that the issue lies in becoming open-minded and the way we perceive it as a society. I'd like to compare this definition with a line by Aristotle. He wrote, "It is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it." Now, we should note that the definition of open-mindedness tells us to consider ideas, or as Aristotle put it, entertain them. We can break this down even further in order to really understand what they mean. To entertain means to hold something in your mind or be willing to consider something. To accept is different. It means both to believe something is true and to see something or someone as satisfactory. Here we have something that we don't have in entertainment, and that is a degree of agreement, and we give the idea a certain weight of truth that is not necessary in order to entertain. So this is where our fault lays, our fault being dismissing foreign ideas too quickly. When we mix up accepting and entertaining, we confuse them in the way that we believe that open-mindedness involves agreeing with new things, which it doesn't. So how can we change this? Well, in such a world of globalization, we are faced with more and more ideas every day. And we are faced with two kinds of ideas, those we see as positive and those we see as negative. A positive idea could, for example, be considering the environmental impacts of your friend being vegan. A more negative one could be considering the idea of someone committing a crime like rape or murder, which is more serious and people do not generally like to entertain the thought. So the negative ideas are more difficult to entertain in this sense that, of course, we don't want to think too much about hurtful or negative things. And we can divide negative ideas even further and say that there are those that consider someone's way of life and those that consider crimes, because they're very different. So considering someone's way of life, we can look at the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is an effect in psychology which states that if we are more familiar with something in the sense that we are comfortable enough to see it often and to see it regularly, we become more comfortable with discussing it. So, for example, if I were to tell you that you have to go introduce yourself to a stranger, you would probably be more comfortable introducing yourself to a stranger you see regularly on the bus than to someone you have never seen in your entire life. The mere exposure effect plays into our open-mindedness in that we are more open to entertain concepts that we have heard of before and that we are close to. And an example of this is in our values. Our parents raise us with a certain set of values and beliefs, and we are generally, later in life, more open to befriending and associating with people of similar ones. With the globalization of our society today and the connections that we have through internet and other technical devices, we are faced with more and more people of different cultures. So when we're a lot younger, we're meeting people and learning about cultures that are already very different. So we're already becoming more open-minded. However, we have to, as responsible partakers in the world, we have to be able to consider. So, globalization has effects on many angles of our lives, including open-mindedness. And in our values, we are seeing a lot more. So, you do not have to change your values or beliefs in order to be open-minded, but rather be considerate and willing to entertain those of other people, which we have to do because you will inevitably interact with hundreds of people who are very different. And as an international school, we already do this. So, how do we learn how to identify entertainment versus acceptance? Well, we already do it in conversation. In regular conversation, you may hear a friend say, "This pizza place was great, you should try it." And then most likely you'll think, "Oh, that's cool, maybe I should try it sometime." But now we have to go a little bit further than pizza places and taste in music. This is where you have to make a conscious effort and really remember the entertain versus accept rule. It can start by you remembering that you could be wrong, someone else could be wrong, you could both be wrong, or you could both be right. When we're more willing to accept our mistakes and our flaws, we become more open to considering those of others. So it starts with your recognition of entertainment versus acceptance, and it starts with your willingness to really be open-minded and your consideration of other people in this society. So don't be afraid to entertain thoughts that make you uncomfortable. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Ask questions instead of making assumptions. And when we do this, we will be part of a more considerate global society. I am open-minded, and I am asking you to be too. Thank you.